Instead, I'm going to record the screen that I have up here, right? So the essential information that appears up here would be available for your viewing pleasure if you just really want to relive the next hour and 15 minutes of your life at some point in the future. You're welcome to do that. But mostly this is for people who miss class. Since nobody here is missing the class, and that's awesome, this may be of less use, but we have been instructed to record every class, okay? And hopefully my microphone is picking up my voice through these 3 layers of fabric that I have blocking me from you, right? All right. Has everybody been able to take a look at the Canvas page? This went live yesterday. You should have gotten a notification. You have a question? You say you got it? Okay, good. This is going to be your one-stop shopping for all things this course and, in fact, for every course you take. Okay. Some professors will use Canvas more than others. Some will do absolutely everything on Canvas, every possible thing you could need. Others, because we are all contractually obligated to put 2 things on Canvas, the syllabus and your grades. Some professors will do those 2 things and nothing else. Okay. I am somewhere in the middle, I think. I try to make as much available on Canvas as I can, as many things as, and I try to make it as easy to find as I can, okay? I don't necessarily use all of the features of Canvas. I don't do Canvas conferences and Studio and some of these things, okay? But everything you will need for the class is on here, okay? That does not mean that you should, if you have a question, you should not email me. Feel free to do that. Or send me a message in Canvas. You can do that as well, all right? The tabs that are most important for our class at least, if you go to the Home tab, you will see only the announcements. I did post one announcement about my office hours. I'm going to hold my office hours on Zoom. There is the link. All right? My office hours will be listed on the syllabus, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. The most important tab, though, is the Modules tab. Okay. Everything that is really important for the class, all of our readings that we will do outside of the books that we'll be using, the syllabus is here, and then I'm going to put all of the recorded class meetings, links to those on here as well. Okay, so I will post this to YouTube, actually, because YouTube does captioning, and then I will post the link here so it doesn't fill up the Canvas only has a certain amount of storage. So, yeah. What's that? How do you send me a message? Yeah, so now my page looks a little different than yours does because I have the professor's page, right? But if you go to Inbox here, okay, and then this is Compose, right? And you should see, which course you have, and I don't know exactly how yours looks, but it's the Inbox page, right? If you want to get to your courses, here they are. It should look pretty much the same, okay? So modules is probably the most important. Everything on modules is also under files, right? So if you want to look for a reading that we have that you're assigned to do, it's going to be here as well as under modules. Your grades, I haven't actually entered assignments in, no, I have actually. Okay, I did more than I thought I did. That's right, I imported this from, okay, anyway. All of your grades will be posted here. So far you have none of these, right? But that's where they're going to be, okay? Okay, let's take a look at the syllabus. As we said in our orientation meeting we had on Monday, the syllabus is like a contract, right? If you decide to stay in this section of this class, as I hope you will, you abide by what's on here, right? Now, I realize you have very little input in this, right? This is dictated to you, but welcome to college, right? This is how it works, okay? All of the course requirements, all of the readings, everything like that is on here, and you agree to do those things, right? The only probably essential thing that you should need on this first little section is that these are my office hours. All right. Wednesday, 11 to 1, Friday, 1 to 3. I will be on Zoom. You can, if you really want to meet with me in person, that's fine. My office is set up so that I can maintain 6 feet of distance from the student. But you'll need to make an appointment with me. Okay, it can be during my office hours. We can do it another time. You'll need to let me know that you'd really like to meet in person, right? And no problem, that's fine. Otherwise, I will just hang out in the Zoom room, and you can log in. If somebody else is in there, you'll hit a waiting room, and if you don't get in the waiting room immediately, just assume that I'm meeting with another student. All right, and hang out. Okay, that's just how office hours go. If you do make a specific appointment, even over Zoom, and you can, then I will make myself available during the time that we, and I won't let anybody else kind of, crowd you out, so to speak. Okay. All right, so questions about office hours or anything about me? I'm not that interesting, so it's okay if you don't have questions. All right, let's talk about this course. First year seminar. Okay, we brought this up very briefly in the orientation session. I said we would discuss it a whole lot more on Thursday when we met. Of course, we're here, we're in the class now, right? And orientation's over. So let's talk about what we have to do in this class. Okay. I did ask last time, I think, what you have heard about first year seminar. Any additional responses to that other than what we said last time? What have you heard about this class? What have you been told? Apart from what I told. Yes?
You got to buy a few books for this class.
You got to buy a few books for this class. Yeah, that's true. Okay. To some extent, it depends on the professor. And you may hear stories about other students' first year seminar classes that make you jealous, right? Because they might be doing really fun things instead of the really fun things you get to do. They may sound funner than what we're doing in here. Okay? That's because it is, to some extent, up to the professor how to design this. There are certain shared readings and shared learning outcomes, as we call them, right? But each professor then gets to design this according to his or her tastes and expertise, right? You should know that I am a historian. Yes, there are actual historians in this world, okay? So I am a historian. My training is, though, interdisciplinary. In grad school, I took a lot of classes in literature, I took classes in art history, I took classes in philosophy and theology. And while I've been here at Flagler, I've taught a dizzying variety of courses. I think I'm up to like 32 separate courses I've taught in 12 years at Flagler. Okay. So I am interested in just about everything. And that could be a problem for this class because I get all these ideas. I'm like, oh, I want to do that in first year seminar, and then I realize I can't fit it in, and so a lot of this stuff ends up on the cutting board. Right? For the most part, though, my focus is historical. There is, as I designed this class at least, a narrative. Right? We're going to follow a story, at least to some extent. For much of this class. And it's a narrative that I think is compelling, and hopefully you will find it so as well. Right? The course description, and I did not write this, this is in the catalog, says the following. Serving as both an introduction to Flagler College, I don't know why I put the Flagler College, and a liberal education, this seminar serves as a bookend to the capstone experience that students will take in their last semester as seniors. Taught by faculty from a range of disciplines and utilizing texts from philosophy, literature, the history of mathematics and science, politics, economics, and the creative arts. That's a lot of stuff. This course emphasizes close reading, critical thinking, and reflection, evidence-based writing, group discussion, and academic skill building. The context for this will be a conversation about knowledge, the individual, society, citizenship, and a liberal education. Now, I could just go on and all of you would say, okay, sounds good, right? And not necessarily think about some of the terms in this paragraph. But I don't want to do that, right? Let's talk about liberal education. I would, if I had a whiteboard available and not just a tiny sliver of one, write this term on the board, because this is really important. Okay, we're going to spend a lot of time thinking about this semester, and hopefully this will carry over into other classes and into subsequent semesters. Flagler College is committed to providing students, no matter what they end up majoring in, a liberal education. All right? I think I said in the orientation, this has nothing to do with politics. This is not liberal versus conservative. This is a very different thing as applied to education. Right? So what do you know about liberal education? What does that mean? Is it something you've heard? Margot, you're nodding your head there. Okay, that's something, right? You heard it, that's good. Any ideas what it means? What does it mean to get a liberal education? It does have to do with liberal arts. What are those? This is another term I would write on the board if I had one available. Liberal arts. What the hell does that mean? What does it mean to be liberal? And I don't mean political, right? Any definitions of liberal apart from politics? Open-ended, right? Or perhaps even open-minded. Good. Okay. Well, the word libera, actually it's liberus, libera, liberum, depending on the gender, in Latin means free. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that your education is free, because you are paying for this. I'm sorry to break it to you that, the liberal education, which is for a free person, does not come free, at least not in our day and age. But it's the education of a free person. Now, that may not have a whole lot of resonance to you because freedom is a given, right? You ever heard the phrase, it's a free country? Okay? Somebody, if you're like, can I do this thing? You may have heard somebody say, maybe rather cynically or snidely, it's a free country. Go ahead, right? And so freedom's a given. In fact, for most of the world today, and this is actually rather shockingly different than in most of history, most of the world's free. Right? We talk in the United States about how it's so incredible that we are a free country and all of this. Well, actually, the vast majority of the world is free. Okay, to one extent or another. There are places that, of course, lack pretty significant places. But most of the world is free. This was not the case when the formulation of liberal education happened. When people first started coming up with this concept, right? We have to go all the way back to ancient Greece. Okay. In ancient Greece, there were, and I'm teaching class on this semester, right? So there were a select number of people who were considered free. Right? Now, depending on the place, right? In Athens, maybe a higher percentage of the population. Certainly in Sparta, or one of these other city-states in ancient Greece, there were fewer. But a small percentage of the population, regardless, right, were free to, do the things that you and I take for granted. Like decide what to do with their time on any given day, and not have it dictated to them. Okay? Greece had a lot of slavery, and slaves were not masters of their own time. They were told what to do. People who were not native born to the city-state they lived in had a lot of restrictions placed on their freedom. And fully half of the population lacked freedom. Which half? Well, that's more than half, probably. I mean, there's a default half of the population. We've got more than half in here. Women? Yeah, women. Right? Women were not free. By tradition, by custom, even by law. They lacked freedom. Right? So in ancient Greece, this is something that was reserved for a select group of adult men who happen to be native to whatever city and state they live in. Right? It is remarkable that something that was so limited in its original formulation is now available to so many people. But what does it consist of? What does a free person want to learn? The artes liberales, that's the Latin for liberal arts, right? We're going to use that term to distinguish it from kind of the modern outgrowth of this, which I'll talk about in a minute here. We're made up of 7 disciplines. Okay? And they were divided into 2 groups. There was this thing called the trivium, which was kind of the introductory education. Okay? The stuff that people had to learn before they could move on to the higher disciplines. These consisted of, does anybody know by chance what the trivium was made up of? What did people learn first? Well, the alphabet's a good, that's a good kind of guess or estimation there, right? In a sense, it's true, okay? They started by learning the basics of language. In, the original terms, this would have been called grammar. All right. Grammar meant something slightly different, I think, in the ancient world than it does now. But it does still boil down to the elements of language. They learned how to speak and to some extent write in the language. Right? The language of learning. In ancient Greece, of course, this would have been Greek. In ancient Rome, it still would have been Greek for the elite people, but increasingly Latin sort of crowded this out and became the language of education. And all through the Middle Ages, Latin was, at least in the West, the language of education. Right? The language that those who had an education knew and used, and that set them apart from others. So grammar was important. Once people learned grammar, once students had kind of begun to master this, they were taught rhetoric. What is rhetoric? What does that mean? It's not a term that's familiar to anybody. It's not the time to be shy. Really? No rhetoric, huh? Okay. To say that something is rhetorical means what? Okay, I mean, we talk about rhetorical questions, okay? To say that a question is rhetorical means it doesn't require an answer, right? It makes a statement on its own even though it's phrased as a question. That is a rhetorical device. Rhetoric is the study of how to use a language effectively. In the ancient world, this was primarily in spoken form. And so the spoken form of rhetoric is called oratory. To succeed as a citizen in democratic Athens, one had to learn how to speak well. All right. But in Rome and later in the Middle Ages, there was more of an emphasis on writing as well, in addition to oratory. Now, in addition to grammar and rhetoric, students from the time of Aristotle on, at least, began to learn what the Greeks called dialectic, what we might call more simply logic. Right? Not just how to say something well, but how to make an argument that makes sense, that is logical and sound. One thing you'll notice about all 3 of these in the trivium is that they have to do with the use of language. Okay? You might think, well, that's ancient history. What does this have to do with us? Okay. How important is the effective use of language in our world today? It's important. Extremely. Okay. Anybody want to elaborate on its importance or give some examples of it? Margaret. Hey. I don't think the microphone probably picked up Margot. She said people judge what you say on the basis of how well you back it up, and that's absolutely true. All right. Yeah, please.
Something as simple as texting.
Okay. Texting. Anybody ever get a text from somebody that made absolutely no sense? You're like, what are you trying to say? Right? I mean, and texting is a pretty low bar for this because the rules of grammar don't exactly apply. All right. There's this guy I know who he's actually deaf, and he is a wonderful, wonderful person. But every time he's a friend of mine, every time he writes me a text, I'm like, Steve, I just cannot make sense of this. Okay, I think this is what you're saying, but you might as well be saying it in Russian, right? And that, that makes an impression, even in a form of communication so informal. Right? Other examples or other thoughts on this? Why is the use of language important? Yes. Job interviews? Yeah, job interviews, right? Or, even if you get past the interview and you actually get the job. Okay? As an example of this, so my older brother is a business executive. He makes a ton of money. He lives in suburban Boston. He works for a Fortune 500 company. He lives in a gigantic house and does all kinds of fun things with his money. Right? He lives a very different life than I do. A humble professor's salary. 7 kids. Okay. I told you I have 7 kids, right? No. I have 7 kids. Okay. Of varying ages. It's not like I have all 7 babies or something. Okay. My wife is not septo-mom. Anyway, all right, that's fine. But he lives this very different life than I asked him a few years ago on an occasion where we got together. I said, Tony, what do you do at your job? What is the fundamental task that you do? And I actually had a suspicion of what he would say. Okay, so he is a business executive. He consults. He's like one of the chief consultants of this company. He's one of the chief, strategists of this company that he works for. Okay. Can you guess what he does, like his kind of nuts and bolts task that he does more than anything else? Yeah, specifically writing. He said 2 words. He said, I write. Now, how important do you think it is for him, as a business strategist, to be able to communicate effectively? To be able to write clearly and coherently? So maybe there is something about this ancient system of the artes liberales that is still applicable for us today. Maybe it's important that we learn how to use language effectively. That we learn how to think clearly and articulate that in both spoken and written form. Right? You may wonder why you have to write so much in college. Well, unless you want to work a job that does not involve any cognitive activity, or very little, all right, chances are you're going to have to write a fair amount. Whatever job you do, you're going to have to compose well-worded emails. You're going to have to write up plans or strategies, or legal briefs, or whatever it is, right? Learning how to use that language is important. This is why we stack class after class after class up upon you, where you learn how to write, where you practice this skill. Okay? When this talks about things like close reading, critical thinking, reflection, evidence-based writing, okay, that's by design. There is nothing more important. More on this later. Some of the assignments you have early in the semester will reinforce this point. Okay. Any questions about that? Some of you are now saying, what have I gotten myself into? I hate writing. Okay. My own daughter, who is a student here at Flagler, has said that to me. Like, I am so scared of the writing. All right. I actually think she writes pretty well. I've read a lot of the papers she's written, but she's scared of it. It's a frightening proposition to think of all the papers you're going to have to write and how these are going to be scrutinized by your professors and maybe even by your peers. Well, that's a chance for growth. Okay. We don't grow when we're just in our comfort zone, right? Now, I need to finish the conversation about the liberal arts. So after learning how to use the language, ancient and medieval students in the artes liberales then learn things like, and here's the list, the quadrivium it was called, the other four, mathematics, or put more simply, arithmetic. They learned how to manipulate numbers. Geometry, and those were differentiated from each other because in a way they certainly were in the ancient world, very different disciplines. Mathematics and geometry were not the same thing. Now they have been merged, all right, but these serve different purposes. Music and astronomy. All right. You're thinking, that is an odd list. Well, I could elaborate on this, it would all make sense, but let's go ahead and move on. Right. Now, in the American higher education system, as this was being formulated in especially the 19th century, though we could find antecedents of it in the 18th century. Let me give you a couple examples. There were two of our founding fathers who founded universities because they knew that these were going to be tremendously important. Both of these men, and yes, they were men, they had Y chromosomes. All right. That's not to say women were incapable of doing such a thing, but you know the social balance was tilted toward the men at this point. Right. But both of these men knew how important universities would be, and they were both classically educated. That is, they received an education that was similar to that that was taught in the Academy of Plato in ancient Athens, or in a monastery in the early Middle Ages, or in a cathedral school in the 12th century. Right? All of these institutions that had carried the tradition of liberal arts forward. And so when it came to formulating a plan for the kind of education they would offer at these universities, they drew upon that, right? I'm speaking here of Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Okay. Which university did Benjamin Franklin found? Anybody know? Where was he from? No idea. He was from Pennsylvania, so he founded the University of Pennsylvania, which is now an Ivy League school, probably one of the elite universities in our country. And he very much inserted this classical liberal arts education. The other is Thomas Jefferson. Which university did he found? Anybody know? Yeah, the University of Virginia, right? That, in many ways, is the kind of ultimate bastion of this whole, the American outgrowth of the liberal arts system. But just about every college and university in the country has imitated this, right? This is why in the American higher education system, you don't dive directly into a single field of study as you do in a European university. Right? If you were to go to the UK and study at Oxford or Cambridge or Durham or St. Andrews or someplace like that, you would specialize almost immediately. You might be able to take classes in other things, but your purposeful education would be in a single discipline. In Germany, same thing, right? And certainly in France and other places, it's a similar kind of system. Okay. And you would come out of that with knowing a whole lot about that thing, right? When I was a student at Oxford, forever ago, like back in the Middle Ages, right? I remember my professors telling me that I was at somewhat of a disadvantage compared to, so I was studying Hebrew, okay? And that was among other things, right? My Hebrew teacher there, the professor, said, well, if you were an undergraduate focusing on Hebrew, this is what you would have done all of this in your first year as an undergraduate. And then you would go on, and by the end of your education in Hebrew, you would be reading extremely advanced texts, right? You'd be reading medieval rabbinical commentaries and things like that. And I was a grad student, for crying out loud, right? I was getting a master's degree there, and I was behind the second-year undergraduates who were at the same university, doing the same kind of thing that I was doing. And you might think, well, I'm going to go off to England and go to school. That sounds great. But there are some real strengths to the American education system. Why do you think it's that learning a broad spectrum of things is important, such that just about every American institution of higher education forces you to do this, forces you to take a curriculum in general education, please? Okay, and why? That's good, but why is that important? Do you want to comment? Yeah. Especially in an increasingly globalized world where we are going to encounter people who are very different from us. Achieving the kind of flexibility as such an education offers will be important. Any other comments on why the utility? Well, a lot of this has to do with some of the other words that appear on. The context for this class will be a conversation about knowledge. We're already talking about that today. The individual. This is really important, right? I want you as individuals to think about where you stand right now with your education and where you would like to go. What you want to achieve out of this. What you are bringing to this. And then as you reflect in your classes, I want you to think how you are changing, right? This process of self-reflection is tremendously important, and this class is meant to foster it. You may not even quite understand what that means. Hopefully you will very soon. Society, citizenship. Let's pause on that one for a minute. What does it mean to be a citizen? Be able to vote, did you say? Yeah. That is certainly a component of it, or that is it's a right in the United States and in many other countries in this world. We might also say that it is an obligation. And let me get on the soapbox here. Okay, this is my soapbox. Please vote! It's 2020. This is an election year. Okay? The decisions we make this year will have a tremendous impact on your future. Don't think, I'm only 18 years old, I don't know enough to vote. Okay, that's bullshit. And I mean that sincerely. All right? Please vote. Okay, off the soapbox. I always say that because I've had students tell me in this class, in first year seminar, it was 2016, I had students kind of reflect on the whole election process, and I had several students write, I just didn't feel like I knew enough to vote. I don't feel like I'm responsible enough. I'm like, what the hell have we been doing all semester? But talking about citizenship and the obligation we have to be engaged and to think about the issues of society and all of this, and you're telling me you don't think you can vote? All right, so I got a little pissed off. So I don't want to scare you into thinking, all right, Dr. Young's going to come and hunt me down if I don't vote or something. Right? Of course, I will not know. please do your citizenship duty. Okay, what else does citizenship mean besides voting and being involved in the process of choosing the yes, your rights. Okay, yeah, and this is important. That concept, by the way, is relatively new. For most of human history, people did not have any concept that they had rights. This only begins to appear about the 14th or 15th century. Okay, and I'm not going to bore you with like the history of the idea of natural rights, but it's really not until the 17th and 18th century, during the Enlightenment, that this becomes kind of, well, part of common conversation. And a nation founded upon the principle that all human beings are equal and have inalienable rights, as this nation was, the Declaration of Independence, right? That was brand new in 1776 when Thomas Jefferson penned those words. The ideas weren't necessarily new, because John Locke had written them a century and a half before, okay? But the application of those ideas about rights to a nation was very new. And it was followed in short order by the French, who did the same thing, and then it kind of snowballed from there, right? Before that time, and even persisting in many parts of the world after that, people didn't conceive of having rights. They conceived of having privilege or no privilege, right? If they were wealthy, if they belonged to a certain social class, if they were part of the right hereditary line, if the color of their skin was a certain hue, they might have privilege, whereas those who didn't fit those categories didn't. Okay? And that persisted, and to some extent still persists among a lot of people, even in our country today. Those ideas, right? That some people are privileged and others are not. But citizenship in the modern world, at least in Western liberal democracies, there's an application of that word again, and it's not even political there, right? It's to say that people are free. Rights are absolutely fundamental. Okay. There were some other hands about citizenship. Anybody else want to say something about this, please?
It's like someone who agrees to abide by rules in exchange for rights to be part of society.
Okay, so yeah, we do have obligations. There are laws. We need to learn what those are. We need to abide by them. We need to be even committed to them. Right? They'll push back when we have the opportunity to push back against them if we don't think they're just or if they ought to be changed. And we can actually take part in a conversation about changing laws by doing a variety of things, by, writing our representatives and asking them to do something about it, or, as we've seen in the last few months, all over the country, taking to the streets, protesting, petitioning, right? Getting involved in a sort of mass movements to try to change things in ways that we see are necessary. Okay. That's a really important component of citizenship. You have a comment. Just want to
Extracting benefits for a country. So I know in South Africa, it's not forced to travel to another country. You have to get a visa, but if you're an American citizen, you just take your passport and leave.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. The American passport is one of the most flexible in the world. It's not the most. I think Germany has its view and is other too. Yeah, you're right. And having lived in South Africa, I saw this. I went to Lesotho one day and I was taking some friends with me, and one guy happened to be from Ghana. And he was from another African country, like he got stopped at the border and could not go in. As an American, somehow within like 7,000 miles away from home, I was able to cross the border into Lesotho, and my friend couldn't, even though he was a fellow African. I found that really ironic and really remarkable. Okay. So yeah, I mean, being a citizen of a certain place does grant certain privileges or certain rights, and these may even be be recognized by those who are not citizens of that particular political entity. But all of this boils down to, at least for our purposes here, obligations we have, certainly rights we have, and we need to be aware of those, but obligations we have to be involved, to participate, okay, to be informed. Gaining an education is not just about, I will not be so naive as to suppose it's not at all about, but it's not just about getting a credential so that you can get a better job than you might be able to do other things. Of course it's about that, right? No one would, I think, argue against that. But there is so much more to being educated. And there is this crushing weight of history upon us of the tradition of liberal education. Right? Where, people from the ancient world on have wanted this so that they could be free in any number of senses. You are indeed, I think, privileged to be here doing this sort of thing. Hopefully you don't take that for granted. Okay, so I sound too much like a lecturing adult here. I'm going to come over and let's go down. A little more nuts and bolts here in the second paragraph of the description. This high-impact course will also develop students' capacities to forge cross-disciplinary connections. I need to pause there. Let's read the whole thing. Reflect critically on their core values and beliefs, and foster deep learning. As a writing-intensive course, it builds upon and complements first semester courses in college writing, and serves as a bridge to the first year learning communities taken in the spring semester. I think that language is antiquated, so ignore that last little clause there. I don't think there are learning communities that are required anymore. So I didn't mean to leave that in there. I didn't realize it was my errors. What is a discipline? Discipline with an article on the front of it rather than discipline. Discipline you might think as like, do this or I'm going to whack you, right? That's just hard. Yeah, an area of study, and it's not just about the content, all right? As a historian, I don't just study names and dates and facts and things like that, right? That is in fact secondary to what I do as a historian. There are a set of skills that go along with the discipline of history, interpretive skills, all right, that are then applied to the subject matter. And it's the same with every discipline, right? Psychology as a discipline. And I assume there are probably several psychology majors in here, because I think that is the most popular major at Flagler College. I assume that many of you probably are heading down that path, and that's fine, that's great. Psychology has a set of skills. Okay? Sociology has a set of skills. Economics has a set of skills. Even the so-called pre-professional programs, like communications and education and business, instill in you a set of skills that hopefully will be portable and will be wide-ranging and flexible enough to allow you to take advantage of any number of opportunities. But these disciplines with their skill sets are especially powerful when they're used together. So as a historian, I have tried over the years to learn as much as I can about economics and about literary theory and about anthropology. Because I wanted to be able to take the skills and the methods used in those disciplines and apply them to the study of history. Bringing these things together. This class very purposefully crosses disciplines, moves between history and literature and philosophy and even to some extent economics. And I will delve, believe it or not, as a historian, into some mathematics this semester. We'll talk about proofs, everybody's favorite mathematical concept, later in the semester. I will take you through what a proof really is. It's not just a torture device used by teachers of geometry. All right. Something much more interesting than that. Okay. There are a lot. I could stop on every single word here, but we will come back to a lot of this. Okay. The learning outcomes. Students will cultivate an understanding of the relationship between a liberal education and being a good citizen. We talked about that already. Students will do close readings. What do you think that means? Yeah.
Where you look carefully into what you're reading.
Yeah. Right. There is passive reading, which is where you just let your eyes pass over the page. Maybe you kind of take in the story or the information or whatever it is. It doesn't transform you in any way. You don't engage with it, right? That's not the kind of reading we're going to do in class. This is not the kind of reading that really makes an impact. Okay. Close reading means, well, maybe you read it more than once. Maybe you look at specific passages with great intent, looking for the meaning behind it. You reflect, and maybe you, and we certainly will do this in class, you maybe even write about it, unpacking those ideas and thinking about their implications. So we'll do close readings, interpret, and write analytically and synthetically. All of these adverbs, right? You're probably wondering what the hell it means to write synthetically. Okay, we will talk about that. About essential historical, philosophical, and literary texts. Number 3, students will develop key skills essential for college success. And I take this very seriously. I actually consulted with my daughter, who is a student here, as I said, she's not a first-year student, and said, what did you want to know? What kind of skills would have been really valuable to you when you started college? And she helped me come up with an assignment, or a set of assignments, I should say, that help you develop these skills. And I'm pretty excited about this. I hope that it will be well met with you as well. So you develop key skills essential for college success, including time management, critical reading and thinking, studying and test-taking capacities, and information literacy, among others. Number 4, students will learn to think critically, where critical thinking crucially involves the ability to recognize and scrutinize the fundamental presuppositions of worldviews, one's own as well as those of others. Now, this word, this term, critical thinking or critical analysis, may be the most important term, the most fundamental term of a liberal education. If you don't hear this term and discuss it and contemplate what it means in just about every class you take, then professors are not doing their job. Hopefully it'll at least be implicit in every class. What does it mean? Yes. Okay, good. Like that. Any other comments? That's not necessarily the whole of it. It's a good start. I'd like to explain it this way. So think about the word critic. What does a critic do? What kind of critics do we have in the world today? Yeah, we've got film critics. Not many of those right now because films sort of stopped. Right. Okay, you said book critics. What did you say? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We may have restaurant critics. Okay. Right now, we have a whole grundle, I love that word, of political critics. You turn on the television and kind of, scroll through quite a number of channels, you are going to see non-stop political critic talk. Okay. If you scroll through a different set of channels, you'll see sports critics. Not much of that going on right now either. Right? There was a beautiful thing that happened on the weekend at Bayern in the Champions League. I was thrilled out of my mind. Okay, having lived in Munich and embraced that team. Some of you are like, man, this just sucks. I got a Bayern fan. But anyway, maybe some of you have no idea what we're talking about. That's okay. So yeah, lots of critics. What is a critic's job? What? To judge. And to, yes. To what? To rate, okay. A rating is really just another word for what? An opinion. Exactly. A critic's job is to give an opinion. If a critic is good and respected, their opinions come not just, they don't just pull their opinions out of the air, right, with no basis to them. They provide evidence to back up or to explain why their opinion is valid. Now, that's really at the heart of critical thinking. To think critically means to develop an opinion about something. And to be able to explain that opinion and justify it with evidence of why it is valid. Okay? So, we will encounter a lot of texts this semester, reading material. Right? We may even think about things that are not literary, like art, or we may, enter into discussion about film or architecture or something like that at various points in the semester. But mostly we're going to be in written texts. Your job as a student learning how to think critically is to develop an opinion of what these things mean. When we read Hamlet, as we will, and I love Hamlet with all of my heart. Now you're thinking, oh man, I'm in the wrong class. Okay. And you will hopefully learn to love Hamlet too. And Hamlet says to Ophelia, "Get thee to a nunnery." Right? Hopefully you'll develop an opinion about why he says that and what that all means. You're thinking, who cares? Well, I think it's important that you care. Because this story is so incredibly beautiful and influential. Right? And it means something. Definitely in terms of what we're trying to do in this class. And so you need to develop an opinion about why Hamlet says that to Ophelia. And why Ophelia subsequently goes insane. And starts like throwing flowers everywhere. And kills herself. Sorry, spoiler alert. Should have said that beforehand. Okay. And why Hamlet does the seemingly insane things that he does. Is he really insane? Is he not insane? Okay. There's a lot of stuff in that text that is not obvious, that we can have an opinion about. And learning how to read like that is itself an incredibly valuable skill. Not because you're going to go be English professors and teach Shakespeare, but because that skill then is portable. You can use that same kind of thought process to do a lot of things. It applies. Okay. I keep getting on these soapboxes here, right? Students will articulate evidence-based arguments in writing. I've already said this a few times, but what is evidence-based argument? What does that mean? Right. I want to be clear, and that's absolutely right. Okay, yeah. Okay, we may talk about those three things, right? Ethos, pathos, and logos. You have an assertion you're trying to make, you can appeal in a variety of ways. Okay, you can appeal to one's reasonable faculties, you can appeal to one's emotional faculties, and you can appeal to on a sense of like, I am an authority on this because I have really thought about this and I have credentials. Ethos, pathos, and logos. I did those in reverse order, but you know, logos, pathos, and ethos. So we'll bring that up again. I want to be clear about the word argument here. Anybody ever seen the Monty Python sketch? And I know this really dates me. This is like ancient history, right? Where the guy goes in and he's like, I want to have an argument. He like slaps down 5 pounds on the desk. And they proceed to have an argument. The guy's like, I paid for an argument. And the other guy's like, no, you didn't. Yes, I did. I just put down 5 pounds. No, you didn't. And then they go back and forth. Right? Yes, I did. No, you didn't. That's not an argument. That's just a contradiction. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. And then he's like, 5 minutes are up, and he dings the bell, and he's like, that's the end of it. Right? That is not an argument in an academic sense. Okay? We don't have two people. This isn't the umpire and the baseball manager like in each other's face yelling at each other, right? That's not what we mean by argument. He was clearly out. No, he wasn't, right? I saw his foot touch the bag before the guy tagged him, or, you know, that's one kind of argument. That is not an academic argument. Okay. What is an academic argument? What are we talking about? Yes? Sorry? Yeah, it's your opinion about what something means, or what the implications of it are. Right? Why did Hamlet tell Ophelia to go to a nunnery? What does he mean by nunnery? Well, I think that it means this. I think he's really telling her that she's a whore and she needs to go to the brothel. That's one possible interpretation, by the way. Okay. And then, you know, this is why I think that, and then bringing in evidence to demonstrate that that argument is valid. So, that's what we mean by this. We're not trying to upset anyone with an argument, though sometimes academics do get angry with each other over things like, well, what the meaning of Hamlet's statement to Ophelia is. Right? Academics sometimes can be rather touchy individuals. There was the department, my PhD from Notre Dame, there was a department at Notre Dame where certain faculty members had restraining orders out against other faculty members because they had gotten into academic arguments and it escalated to that point, right? That's not going to happen in here, okay? This is a respectful and inclusive space, right? There is room for some people to think that Hamlet meant one thing and some people to think that Hamlet meant another thing. So long as you can back it up with evidence and make a good case for your opinion, so much the better for everyone involved. Okay. These are the required texts. These are the things you need to buy or obtain in some way. Okay. You already got the best we could do. I assume you've read that. If you've not read that, you are way behind at this point. All right. You should take it seriously that you were told to read this over the summer. We will be discussing this in the next few days, and we will return to it at the end of the semester. Plato, The Last Days of Socrates. This is a Penguin edition, Penguin Classics edition. The texts that we'll be reading from that are the Apology and the Crito. We are not reading the whole thing, only those two. Hamlet, the Folger Shakespeare Library edition of that specifically, which has really good notes, really good explanations. Timothy Ferris's book, Coming of Age in the Milky Way. This is a history of science. It's extremely well written, compelling work. We're going to be spending some time with that, talking about, among others, Galileo, Newton, Einstein, and Darwin. Those are probably the four most important figures we will be discussing. This all fits within the narrative of the course. Okay. Sigmund Freud's Civilization and Its Discontents. Those of you who are studying psychology hopefully will cheer to see that, or maybe you won't because you think Freud was full of crap. I'm somewhere in the middle of those two opinions, right? But we will not be studying or reading this sort of to learn a theory of psychology so much as to look at Freud's observations about how the world works, right? Why human beings behave the way they do, and fit that into a historical context in which he wrote it. And then finally, Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I thought long and hard. I wanted to engage the topic of racism in this class. It fits with the narrative. I was doing it anyway. I really admire Ibram Kendi. I think he is one of the most important voices on this topic today. I had the privilege of listening to a lecture of his some years ago when he was teaching at the University of Florida. He's now at Boston University, and thought he was brilliant then, and I still do, okay? But this book is one that'll make you think. I'm not asking you to agree with absolutely everything he says in that book, right? But at least to give his ideas a chance and see what they do to you, to ruminate on them, all right? And so we will read parts of that. We will not read that entire book either. Now, this is not all we're going to read, okay? If you look at the daily schedule, which is on the syllabus here, down about page 5 or so, you will see that for today, you were supposed to read Tigou's The Best We Could Do. Well, yeah, you were supposed to read that over the summer. For next time, before you come to class, you need to read these 3 articles right here. Sternberg's Giving Employers What They Don't Really Want. Wong's Why We Shouldn't Think About College as a Business. And the third one, and I didn't put the author in there for whatever reason, but Why Air Force Cadets Ought to Study Philosophy. This is all helping us to think further about liberal education. So you need to read those 3 things. Where do you find them? You should know that already. On Canvas, under course readings. Okay, they are there. Just to show you they are. Well, here they are, first of all. If you look, there's the Why Air Force Cadets and Why We Shouldn't Think About College as a Business. But if you go to the Modules tab, you'll see that these are the first 3 things that come up. Okay. Easy peasy. Let's go back to the syllabus. All right. And some days we will be in the books. Some days we will be in readings that I will distribute to you online. They're all there. If you have any question about a reading, if a link doesn't work, some of these are online. Okay, if a link doesn't work, please let me know immediately. If you click on something and it doesn't come up, I want to know that immediately so I can fix that. Because if you can't access it, chances are everybody is has the same problem. What do you have to do in this class? This is, of course, the question you've been waiting for all day, right? There are 4 papers. There is no exam in this class. You do not take a midterm, you do not take a final. You write 4 papers. These papers are around 5 pages each. So over the course of the semester, you're going to write about 20 pages of academic writing. Okay, fits with a writing-intensive course without being so incredibly onerous that you don't spend any time doing anything else. Okay? This is by far the most important class you are taking this semester. Every one of your professors will tell you that. You have to decide on your own which one is really the most important, right? But in my opinion, this is the most important class you're taking this semester, and these are the assignments where this class will become meaningful to you, where you get to think about this and articulate your interpretations, your critical analysis of the things we're reading and talking about. Okay. Specific instructions for each paper will be given several class periods in advance of each due date, and these are interspersed throughout the semester. Right. There are times in class, and you should be prepared to do this at any moment, where I will ask you to write something in class. This will be, a paragraph. Grading for this is not especially rigorous. And you shouldn't worry over much about, saying everything in the most impressive fashion, right? But I want you to wrestle with ideas in class from time to time on paper. This helps us focus, helps us have better discussions if we do this. So we'll often do this at the beginning of class, sometimes either in the middle or the end, but most often at the beginning. Little hint, you may want to be prepared to do this at the beginning of class next time, specifically to think about some of the things in the best we could do. All right, so it might pay to review that book a little bit before you come to class. Or at least think about it. I don't want to freak you out either. You don't have to go reread the whole thing 4 times before you come to class next time. All right, but certainly if you have not read this or not finished it, I want you should do that. Since today's assignments, meaning the reading assignments, serve as a prompt for many of these in-class writing assignments, it is essential that you come to class prepared. If you haven't done the reading, I might walk in and say, offer your interpretation of this in the reading. What do you think this means? If you haven't read, you might as well pack up and leave and get a 0 for that. So you need to come to class prepared. This next one is the assignment that my daughter helped me to formulate. Okay, the college skills scavenger hunt. I will spend a little time periodically talking about essential college skills. This will be let's spend the first 10 minutes talking about how to use the library, or how to, access this kind of service, or what to do when you meet with your advisor, or something like that. Right? But this will also be beneficial. Okay? It's at the end of the syllabus. There are 3 parts to it, and these will be turned in these are due at different times in the course. Okay, they're each worth 10 points. Section A helps you become oriented to Flagler College and to St. Augustine more broadly. These are really quite simple. I'm not going to grade these with any special rigor or anything like that. So you should use grammatically correct language as much as you can and all of that, right? But make a list of 2 to 3 good study spots and explain briefly why these are appealing to you. That's an important thing, believe it or not, okay? If you don't find a good place to study that's comfortable for you, that works for you, you're going to be at a disadvantage. I remember as a college sophomore, when I really started to take education seriously. Don't be like me. Take your education seriously from the beginning. My freshman year, not an entire waste, but I wasn't as serious as I was later. When I was a sophomore, I found this little spot at the back of an auditorium on campus. There was rarely anything going on in that auditorium. They only had special concerts and things in there. There was never any rehearsals or anything. There was almost never anybody in there. There was a little patch of carpet in the back of this auditorium. It was quiet. It was isolated. I worked well in that kind of setting. Okay, and I got my books and spread them out and sat on the floor and did my work. And it was effective. It worked for me. I remember, specific books I read sitting exactly in that spot. You need to find places like this. Okay, I need to calm down and not talk about all of these in such detail, right? But these are, I think, important skills. Visit 5 historically or culturally significant sites in St. Augustine and write a description and reaction to them, right? Make a list of 5 local businesses that you think are going to be important to you. These can be coffee shops or bookstores, or just which grocery store you like the best. Do you want to go to Publix or Winn-Dixie or Walmart or Aldi or Target, or which one do you think is most appealing and why? Okay. The second one is about using the library. And this is there's a little more intent here. You have to do a little more work. It's worth the same number of points, but these are a little harder to achieve. You need to use some of the library resources here. Suffice it to say that. Then I'll talk about these. And then finally, the third one has to do with services offered on campus. You need to attend office hours with one of your current professors. Very easy. I am open, okay? Come attend office hours with me. Come talk to me. Right? Attend a meeting with your academic advisor. You have to do this anyway to register for classes next semester. This will happen, the end of October, beginning of November. This is not due till the 1st of December, this section specifically. So you have time to reflect on that. And then third, attend a meeting with a writing tutor in the Learning Resource Center. Right? And you need to write about each of these briefly. You only want a paragraph about your experience and what you think you could do better. All right? And that's it. Now, that may sound like a lot, or maybe it sounds not that difficult. I don't know. All right? To succeed in this class, the most important thing is come to class prepared. Read the stuff before. You will be responsible in some way for everything you're assigned to read. So do the reading. Be prepared. Come to class ready to discuss. It seems that some of you are a little more reticent to do this. If you have a hard time saying anything in public, like putting yourself out there, push yourself. At the very least, ask a question. A piece of advice someone gave me when I began college was, don't let an opportunity to learn pass you up. If you are legitimately curious about something, you don't know the answer to something, and there's a possibility to ask a question about it, even if it's just a factual question. Like, who was Aristotle again? That's not a stupid question. It's a fine question. We talked, I think, in orientation about stupid questions. Right? Professor, I missed class. Was there anything important? Yes, of course. Everything is important. Right? Don't ever ask that question. But if you ask, when was this again? Or who was he again? Or whatever it is, right? Those are fine questions. I remember sitting in an anatomy and physiology class in college, and I didn't know something about the Krebs cycle or about, some physiological process. And I remember thinking, I don't want to raise my hand. I don't want to look like a nerd here. I don't. And I'm like, this is probably the only opportunity I will ever have to ask this question. Raise my hand. Professor Grosbeck, the guy's name. What was this again, right? And it was a good question. I learned something. I've probably forgotten it now, but I learned it then, right? Okay, we are over time, we're out of time. Please take a minute to grab a sanitizing wipe and just wipe down your workstation here. I know this is pedantic, but it's necessary for the health of the community. Yes?
For those 3 sections, do they have to be started like now, or can we just start them whenever?
You can start them whenever you look. If you look on the schedule, you see when they're due.
All right.
Section A is due October 1st.
Should we go like a little time?
You got a little time.